So I mentioned that 4.5 years ago, I was working as a receptionist, and I was in a production company in California, and I was a receptionist, and I really wanted to sort of move up within the company. And no matter how hard I worked, I couldn't get promoted. No matter how many times I stayed late or came in on the weekends, hoping that my boss would notice me and promote me, it never happened. And in fact, for the position I wanted, they began looking for external candidates. I'm sure anyone who's been through that knows how that can be. And because I was a receptionist, it was my job to serve water to the people who were coming in to interview for the job that I wanted. I know, it wasn't easy. And so I didn't really necessarily feel good about myself because of that, and I did some soul searching, and I asked myself, okay, well, what do you really want to do in life? Because clearly this is probably not meant for you. What do you really want to do? And I'd always been passionate about broadcast journalism. So I called a television station in New York, a local news station, and I asked them, what do I need to do to get a job with you guys? So unfortunately, I didn't have any experience. They needed about 2 or 3 years previous experience as a reporter, and the only experience I really had was answering phones and sending faxes. That's all I really knew how to do. And so they said no repeatedly to me, and on top of that, I had a British accent. And in America, if you want to get into the local news business, it's very difficult if you have a foreign accent. It's a lot easier in national news, but certainly in local news, it's a lot harder. So they said no, and I decided I wasn't going to take no for an answer, so I basically called in sick to work, and I paid my roommate, my housemate, a few $100s, whatever, and they helped me, they helped film me around Los Angeles, sort of acting like a reporter. I studied reporters inside out. I studied everything that they did inside out, and I put together various packages, which is sort of voiced over pieces that I learnt basically from studying various reporters, and I sent it to this news station, hoping that they would give me a chance. Unfortunately, a lot of these news stations received thousands of applications, thousands of tapes, so it took them several months to get back to me. And during that time, the recession kicked in and I lost my job. So there I was, no money, no job. So I decided anyway that I was going to move to New York and just hope that this one station would get back to me. So eventually, after emailing and pestering constantly, they eventually got back to me. They brought me in for an interview, and they were so impressed that even though I had no experience, that I put together this tape by myself, showing what I could do, that they hired me on the spot. So, thank you. So that's why I say trust your struggle. The second thing I believe, and this sort of comes out of left field, is I honestly do not believe in competition. The corporate world will tell you that if you want to get ahead in life, you need to be competitive. You need to have that drive to succeed and compete with one another. But I don't believe in competing for what I want. I believe in creating what I want. Abraham Lincoln once said that the best way to predict the future is to create it. In order for me to be successful, I don't believe that I need to take anything away from anyone else. Now, of course, you know, there are some advantages to looking at your peers for inspiration, definitely. But I think that having a competitive spirit, having that need for one-upmanship, and comparing yourself to other people again and again can actually bring out fears and insecurities that end up holding you back. And the last thing I'm going to say, it is loosely related to hard work. And when I first heard this phrase, I thought it was such a cliche. I'd heard it so many times growing up. And that is, success comes when opportunity meets preparation. I'd heard that so many times, I thought it was a cliche. I never really paid attention to it. Only now do I realize how true that really is. I'll give you an example. So when I was in local news in New York, I really wanted to work my way up to get into national news. I'd always wanted to work for CNN since I was a teenager. And I realized, after studying different reporters and how they made it, I realized that it was crucial for me to have a specialty, some sort of expertise, something that I could do better than others, I guess. And so that could be anything from being a sports reporter to being a political reporter or a business reporter. And I was very passionate about business news. So while I was working in local news, I decided to study and teach myself business news. Not necessarily because there was an opportunity coming my way or there was an interview that I was preparing for, but because I trusted that one day an opportunity would come and I needed to be ready. So every weekend I went to the library. One weekend I'd study stocks. The next weekend I'd study bonds. The next weekend derivatives. The next weekend mergers and acquisitions, teaching myself. And in fact, the librarians on 33rd and Madison in New York got to know me very well because oftentimes I'd be the last person to leave. So after doing that for a few years, eventually by pure chance, I happened to meet an executive at CNN. And I asked him which department he worked in. He said he ran the business news unit and he was looking for a reporter. So when I met him, he gave me about 2 weeks to come in for a screen test and also for a financial news test as well. So in his mind, he felt guilty because he only had given me 2 weeks to prepare. But in my mind, I knew in my heart that I had been preparing for years. So this is a lesson as well that I'd learnt from my older brother. Some of you have already approached me about him, but my older brother is an actor, and he starred in a movie that came out this time last year called 12 Years a Slave. He was nominated for an Oscar for Best Actor, and I'd learnt this lesson from him. He is a master preparer. When he was 13 years old, he would lock himself in his room and write Shakespeare on the walls, and he would study and memorize various plays from Measure for Measure, Twelfth Night, Richard III, not because he had an audition coming up, but just in case, in a few years, an audition came his way, he wanted to be ready. It didn't matter how many times he had to do it. He did it again and again and again until he got it right. Most people wait until they get the call for a job interview before they begin to prepare, or they wait until they get the call for an audition before they begin to rehearse. But my brother taught me to prepare well before you get that call.
I'm Zane Asher. This is CNN.